There's a hidden reason that your reflux or GERD symptoms continue to come back no matter what you do, no matter what medication or supplements you use or dietary changes that you make. It just comes back, and it can be really frustrating to try and figure out why. So whether you're dealing with heartburn all the time, or maybe it's just when you sleep at night, or maybe it's just like when you watch old episodes of Three's Company. Like, why would that happen? Why do I only feel better on Thursdays? Are Thursdays the day that I get to not suffer and all the other times is miserable? So I understand your frustration. My acid reflux was so bad that I completely lost my voice for 8 years. Like, walk around with a notepad so I can ask somebody what aisle the toilet paper is on for 8 years. So this topic gets me a little bit angry just because I see the amount of suffering that is going on with people, and the information and the research that I found that helped me turn this situation around is just not available to everybody for some reason. So I was able to fix this issue. I don't carry those notepads around anymore, stupid notepads. So whether you're dealing with acid reflux or GERD or LPR, no matter how fancy the name is that you were given for this suffering issue that you're dealing with, what we're going to talk about today will apply to help you understand, why is this so hard to fix? Why do I only fix it for a little bit and then it comes right back? So we're going to jump over to the smartboard and help you understand the actual underlying cause that's creating this coming back again and again for you, and steps that you can take right away to start moving in the right direction. So there's two subsets of people that we need to help find their hidden cause of their reflux coming back again and again. And the first subset of people are going to be the people who have probably seen like any of our other videos, and they understand that acid reflux is not usually caused by too much stomach acid like advertisers want us to believe. Acid reflux in most cases is caused by a lack of stomach acid because of this LES valve, or this lower esophageal sphincter at the bottom of the esophagus that opens so food can come back in. Once that food is acidified, that triggers that LES valve to close so things don't come back up. But if somebody just has a small amount of acid, but it's not enough acid to trigger that LES valve to close, then the small amount comes back up and it burns them, and like, ah man, I got all this reflux. So if you already understand that and you're taking steps to acidify your stomach correctly, but you're still having the reflux come back, well, there are things that can go wrong that we need to troubleshoot today. I'm going to help you figure out those things. But before we get to that, keep in mind that 23 different doctors couldn't tell me that. I didn't understand that I was having a problem where there wasn't enough acid. All the doctors that I saw said, hey, it's a great idea if we just turn that acid off. And let's use some PPIs, or a proton pump inhibitor. And that's the most common steps to take with some type of reflux. So we need to help the people that are taking steps to turn off acid understand why their reflux is coming back first. And just keep in mind that, remember, I'm not a doctor. I'm not giving you any medical advice. I'm just a professional stand-up comic turned nutrition author, because when those 23 different doctors couldn't help me fix this, I had no choice but to dig for my own answers and figure out what was really going on. So now I just teach health professionals in more than 40 countries how to help their clients fix the actual underlying causes of health problems instead of just covering up the symptoms. So this is not medical advice. I'm not telling you to go against your doctor. I just want to share some information that I found in the medical literature that helps us understand why this might not be the best approach. And then you can take that information to your doctor and you can understand the right questions to ask your doctor. But you can see, with 23 doctors, you can understand. I understand your frustrations a little bit. I'm basically just you 20 years later. People tell me every day, I've seen like 3 different doctors and I've tried 4 different medications. I'm like, well, you got a ways to go to catch up with the number of people that got this wrong for me. So the turning off the stomach acid was something that I did with a lot of these doctors, and I would have my symptoms improve. That burning would stop, but my voice wouldn't get better because there's still enzymes here in your stomach that can come back up. You're not fixing the reflux, you're just turning off the symptom, the feeling, the sensation of that acid coming back up. And those enzymes that can come back up are made to help us break down protein. Well, guess what all this is made of? All that esophagus, all the larynx, all those vocal cords, that's made of protein. So I wasn't allowing that to heal because things were still coming up and creating that damage. But for a lot of folks, they just want to know, well, I turned off stomach acid, but I'm still feeling this acid. So we need to understand that it doesn't always work because your body is fighting against this with everything it's got. Because your body understands how important that stomach acid is. Mother Nature is not an idiot. We don't need to fix the things that she's trying to make happen. The body is not so dumb. We do a lot of dumb things with the body, like telling your wife she looks fat in those jeans kind of dumb. Like, we do some stupid stuff. So we need to understand that if we can work with the body instead of against it, it's a lot easier to actually fix the underlying cause of the problems that are going on. So most people end up going from PPI to PPI because one will turn it off for a day or so, but then the body finds a way to fight back and try and make happen what it's trying to make happen. So why would the body want to do this? Well, we really need this acid here to break our food down to get the nutrients out of that food. Have you ever heard of any health issue that can come from nutrient deficiencies? There's a lot of them. We hear about it every day. Well, that's a great way to create nutrient deficiencies, is by turning off the digestive process. Let's look at some studies here, and I'll put the links to these studies in the description below this video so you can dig into these a little bit more. But let's look at this study here on proton pump inhibitors and bone health. We hear a lot about an association with osteoporosis because the body's not getting the nutrients it needs, and it might have to mine itself to get what it's looking for. This study here on malabsorption related issues associated with chronic proton pump inhibitor usage. We have proton pump inhibitor use and risk of depression and anxiety in children. But children are annoying anyway, so who cares about them, right? The impact of proton pump inhibitors on the human gastrointestinal microbiome. Seems like every study that everybody talks about today is how the microbiome is creating all these different health issues. And when we turn off that stomach acid, we're turning off the barrier that keeps all the bad guys out. Any kind of microorganism that comes in on the food that we're eating is supposed to die in that acid bath. So when we're turning that off, we're letting all the bad guys in, have a party. It's going to be a good time. This study on the duration of proton pump inhibitor therapy and the risk of small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, that bad guys coming in and setting up in the small intestine like we just talked about. Association between vertigo and PPI use. A systemic review, the use of proton pump inhibitors and increased susceptible to enteric infections and bad guys coming in. We have proton pump inhibitor use is associated with broad spectrum of neurological and adverse events, including impaired hearing, vision, and memory. So I guess that only matters if you want to hear things or see things or remember the things that you heard or saw. We have association of suicidal ideation and depression with the use of proton pump inhibitors in adults. So the body is trying to keep these things from happening. It understands that that stomach acid is crucial for the body to operate correctly. So when you're using a medication to turn off that process and the acid keeps coming back and you're like, well, gosh, what's wrong with me? Why doesn't this fix it? The body is trying to help you survive. It's trying to do the right thing. But what we need to understand is that this acid coming up the esophagus here is damaging those tissues at a really magnified rate. And most people are not willing to put effort into fixing their health issues. I'm not going to do anything. Give me a pill. That's about as much effort as I'm going to do. So this option becomes very important for the majority of the population. But if you've listened to me yammer on this much already, you're probably willing to put effort into your health. So there needs to be solutions for you as well. And then people are going to be like, well, why didn't my doctor tell me about these other options? Well, I don't know, 23 different doctors didn't tell me that. It's just not in their training. Keep in mind that this reflux stuff that seems to be causing all these troubles, it's a multi-billion-dollar industry. Do you think that they're just going to shut that down? I mean, think of the impact that that would have. Can you imagine the number of pharmaceutical executives that would no longer be able to buy a speedboat? That could totally crush the speedboat industry. What about speedboat salesmen? Little Jimmy wouldn't even be able to eat because his daddy wouldn't have anybody to sell a speedboat to. I can't afford a speedboat. Can you afford a speedboat? So, don't be so selfish. Do you really just care about yourself and your health and your well-being and your ability to live? Just because this treatment caused me to lose my voice for 8 years and completely remove my ability to create any kind of income and had my girlfriend leave me and get evicted from my apartment and I had to file for bankruptcy, that doesn't mean that those things are going to happen to you. So don't be so selfish. Think about the speedboat people. So there's that. But just because this is one option doesn't mean that you're not allowed to find your own solutions for yourself and then ask your doctor, how can I make this work for me? So let's look into that a little bit for you. So when we're looking at this lack of HCl, it's really common for someone not to be able to make enough stomach acid for a wide variety of reasons. So this thing where I was making stomach acid, I didn't have reflux before, and then all of a sudden that happened, there's a lot of things that can create this in the body. And what's really weird is that we need to be able to break our food down to get nutrients like zinc and chloride and all these things that the body needs to be able to make hydrochloric acid. So as soon as a person has some episode come up, maybe a lot of stress in their life, maybe some type of food poisoning or infection or something that gets in and has the ability to make this go awry, they can get stuck like that for years or decades because now the body can't break down the food well enough to get the nutrients that it needs to make that hydrochloric acid. So it makes sense that this happens, but when we're looking to fix this, now let's jump over and we'll jump into the people who understand that this needs to be acidified. And they're taking steps to do this, and it's still not really getting it to go away all the way. So in most cases, people are not using enough HCl. Like the bottles say like take 1 per day, and that's what they're doing, and that just doesn't enough to make that really happen. When we want to understand how to fix the problem, we need to kind of work with the body again. So we'll look at this study here on mealtime supplementation with betaine HCl for functional hypochlorhydria. And hypochlorhydria is a medical term that you just don't hear about it, but it means low stomach acid. It's kind of really popular. A lot of people have this issue. And so this study showed that if they created this hypochlorhydria issue or low stomach acid by using a PPI, and then all these digestive symptoms came up from the people who have low stomach acid, things like burping and bloating and indigestion and dyspepsia and slow gastric emptying and constipation and all the things that we see with our clients when there's not enough stomach acid, they saw those come up when they turned off stomach acid. And then when they supplemented with betaine HCl capsules in the middle of their meal, that's when we want to take this, is in the middle of the meal, then they were able to improve all of those symptoms. Now in this study, they didn't talk about reflux because remember, these people had just turned off stomach acid. We're going to talk about some things here in a minute that really magnify reflux, that you're going to understand that a person probably has to have stomach acid off for a while to really create this problem. But this study showed that they could fix this by supplementing with this HCl. So that's usually what we do with our clients. I'm not going to cover all of that in this video, but I'll put a link in the description below for our video on how much betaine HCl do I need, so you can kind of go through that and understand the right way to use it. When you're using it the wrong way, it can really magnify some symptoms. Because think about this. This valve is get triggered by stomach acid, so if you put a little bit more acid in there, but it's not yet enough to trigger this valve to close, well, now you just increased the level of acid that's going to be coming up and burning you. So a lot of people will find increased symptoms when they start using this, and they're like, well, that didn't work for me, that made me worse, and then they just stop and they continue to search for answers. So we want to understand what's going on in the body. It might take you a little bit more work to dig into some of these troubleshooting things that we're going to talk about today, but once you understand what's most likely for you, at least you have some understanding of why does this keep coming back? Why can't I really fix this? So the first mistake is someone not using enough HCl to really acidify the stomach correctly, and that video will kind of walk you through how to figure that out for yourself. It's really going to be different from person to person. But also the next thing is someone will use the wrong HCl. Most HCl capsules that you get on the market contain pepsin, which is an enzyme that helps us break down protein. So it can help us digest better. So all the manufacturers put it in there. But if someone needs to work up to 5 capsules of HCl in order to really acidify their stomach, then that's usually too much pepsin for a person to take, and it creates a lot of discomfort. And they're like, I feel worse, so I can't use that much. And they go back down, but so they don't acidify it enough to stop that reflux. So we use an HCl that doesn't contain any pepsin. I'll put the link in the description below just so you can see that. I'm not telling you to use that one. I'm not telling you that's going to fix everything that's been going wrong in your world, but I know you're going to want to see that. But using an HCl without pepsin can be important. Now here's the most common thing that someone needs to troubleshoot and fix. It's that these acids that you're putting in to help acidify are being neutralized by the byproducts put out by some type of bacterial overgrowth or some type of yeast, mold, fungal type overgrowth, either here in the stomach or the small intestine. In either location, they have the ability to create trouble. Remember that study that we looked at says that proton pump inhibitors have the ability to really create some SIBO trouble, or small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, because that lack of acid is letting them all come in. We'll talk about some other ways that can create trouble too, but what's important to understand is a lot of these types of bacteria can put out these alkaline byproducts. So now we're alkalizing the stomach even more. So if a person put in like 5 capsules of HCl, but all this alkaline waste was neutralizing that HCl, then those 5 capsules might be only as effective as 1 or none. So a lot of people need to take steps to wipe out an overgrowth before that HCl is going to be effective enough to trigger this valve to close and then stop the reflux. The other thing we need to think about is the magnified pressure that will come from the gases that these microorganisms are making and creating. So they can create gases here in the stomach, and those gases will create pressure in the stomach, and that pressure pushes things up even more. So this is the trouble that really magnifies reflux for most people. It's that they have a small amount of acid, and then they have all these gases either here or here putting pressure on those things to push them up in a magnified manner. So some people might have gas going out the back door, they might just feel bloated, and some people are going to have reflux. It's really going to vary. Some people will have all. I won, I got all of them, look at me. So we talk about wiping out bacteria in a lot of videos. I'll put a link to one in the description below on how to wipe out bacteria in the stomach. Again, this will be a 6-hour video if we talk about each one, but when you see which thing really applies to you the most, you're going to have to dig into that and understand the steps to really fix that issue so that you can acidify the stomach correctly and get that valve to close like it should. Now, a SIBO relapse issue is common. Some people might take steps to reduce this overgrowth in the small intestine, and then a month or so later it comes right back. And usually it's because they don't acidify the stomach enough to close that front door. Remember, that's the front door to keep the bad guys out. But this acid coming in, it triggers a lot of things. It's triggering hormones, and that's kind of what's causing these sphincters to close. But some of the hormones also send signals down here to what's called the ileocecal valve, which is a similar sphincter to this that goes between the small intestine and the large intestine. So it's supposed to open so food can go into the large intestine, and then it's supposed to close so all this fecal matter here and all this bacteria that should be in the large intestine, we want the bacteria in the large intestine, but this closes so those bacteria don't go back in. But when we don't have enough stomach acid, that signaling is not working correctly, and it can leave this back door open. So a lot of people will think they treated these overgrowth issues, but they left the front door and the back door open, so then it just comes right back a month or so later. So this is really common because they think they took care of the problem, but this bacteria coming back is creating all these gases and pressure, and again, it's pushing things back up, or it's neutralizing these acids. So these things need to be taken care of together. Some people might wipe things out, or they might increase acid. You got to do both so that you're not leaving those doors open and inviting that trouble back in. This was a problem that I had that was part of why I had so much trouble. I wasn't making sure that everything was taken care of and then closing the doors. So the biggest problem that I had was that I had bacteria feeding down in even after I was doing these things correctly. So I had an infection in a root canal that I had. A little pocket was still there, and bacteria got in there and set up camp, so I had this infection in my mouth. And I also had an infection in my sinuses. So I was doing all the right things, but then this bacteria was feeding down from my sinuses and from in my mouth, down my esophagus, and setting up camp again. It was just this constant supply of bad guys going into my digestive tract, and so it was creating the trouble all over again. Again, 8 years carrying the notepad around. You can see I had a lot of things I had to work through. So we're just trying to make it where it doesn't take you 8 years. It really shouldn't take anybody 8 years. So that can be one problem that somebody has to fix is, do I have some type of dental issue? I went to a biological dentist to figure that out. I'll put the video about that in the description below, as well as the steps that I took to take care of my sinus infection. Now, another issue is that when it comes to diet, for some people, certain foods can kind of loosen up this LES valve a little bit. So if you're eating things like, for some people, a lot of fat can do that. Maybe a ketogenic diet could do that. If someone doesn't have enough minerals in the system and their blood pressure is really low, they might have to lift minerals so that this valve can tighten correctly. So doing things that can loosen up that valve can be the problem for some people, and I'll have the video on fixing a loose LES valve in the description below. But we need to be aware that that's a possibility. Some people, when they just eat chocolate, it loosens that up for them. Sorry about your luck, but we need to understand that this is a possibility. And if you can remove all these foods that can cause trouble and then see, does the situation improve for you, then you can test out one food at a time. You can see, can I get some chocolate back in, please? You know, maybe you can, maybe you can't. But understand that foods can have an effect on that valve. A lot of people also will have a hiatal hernia and they don't know, where the stomach is kind of pulled up into that, through the diaphragm a little bit. It kind of tore that structure. And so now that LES valve is in the wrong place and it's not really closing correctly. So a lot of times you can find a good chiropractor that can help you understand if you have a hiatal hernia. There's scans that a doctor can do to kind of see, is there a hernia there going on? But if that's the case, you're going to have to fix that. Otherwise, it doesn't matter how much you acidify your stomach. If this valve is all jacked up and pointing the wrong way, how's it going to close? It's not going to close correctly. So that has to be corrected in order to do that. If you're having a lot of stress, and if you're like me, this situation was stress for me, so it was a real problem. But when you're really stressed, or if your body's really stressed because of some type of overgrowth or something, or some infection that it's dealing with, it's really stressing the body out, then it pushes the body into that sympathetic fight or flight part of our autonomic nervous system. And for our digestion to work correctly and for our body to be able to make hydrochloric acid, it needs to be able to move into the parasympathetic rest and digest state. So if you have some stresses, if your boss is a jerk, you know, find a way to change that. And you're not going to change your boss, but maybe you change your job. But if there's stress in your life, you have to figure out how to reduce that so that your body can function correctly. And then diet can become a big deal. Some people are like, oh, it depends on what I eat, whether I get reflux or not. Well, if there's an overgrowth in here and you're eating high carbohydrate, high sugar, processed junk food, that really feeds those bad guys and can really activate them. And then they create a lot more gases and a lot more pressure and push things up. So you might have to go on a lower carbohydrate diet. That doesn't mean you have to do a ketogenic or a carnivore diet. Those things can cause trouble for some people. For some people, they work great, but you really want to understand what's going on there. I have a lot of videos about those, but I just like to see people do a lower carbohydrate diet where they're removing these processed junk and sugars, and then they're not creating as much pressure pushing things back up. A lot of it is about pressure. And when you talk about diet with reflux, a lot of people are like, oh, well, I'm on the acid blocker diet and I'm eating foods that are not acidic, but that's going the wrong way. Again, that's someone thinking that this acid is the problem. The acid is there for a reason. We need that acid. So when you're trying to eat foods, and a lot of people will be like, oh, these enzymes that come back up can get activated when they get a little bit more acidic, and then they're going to damage these tissues. So just don't eat any foods that are acidic, and that's how you're going to fix your reflux. But if you fix the acidity of the stomach, then this closes correctly, and those enzymes aren't going to come up anyways. We want to fix the actual problem, not just dodge the situation and run in horror from all of these foods. So eating low acid foods is never going to truly fix the reflux. Things are still going to come back up. You're just not having any acid to feel any of that. So we want to fix it so that it actually works and the body can actually break down your food and get nutrients out of that food. So that whole page of studies does not become appropriate for you. So when we're looking at the steps that you want to take to fix this for yourself, what becomes most important is first acidifying the stomach or bringing down this overgrowth a little bit if there's one. And in most cases, if somebody doesn't have enough stomach acid, there's going to be an overgrowth there. It comes in on the food that we're eating. It's really hard to avoid. So it's just really common. So if someone has a lot of reflux, I like to see them take steps. And we talk about those in other videos, like D-limonene is a natural orange peel extract, and celery juice is great, mastic gum. There's a lot of antimicrobials that people use to reduce this overgrowth here and here. But those become the most important things. Reducing the overgrowth and acidifying correctly is going to fix the issue for most people. So then if that's not the case for you, your next step is investigating which one of these things is creating trouble for you. So you probably want to bookmark this video and check the links below for the other videos on these topics so you can dig into those and understand how to really figure out, is this a problem for you, and how to fix those issues. And if any of this is just overwhelming you too much, we'll put a link in the description below for our totally free digestion course. And it's totally free, and it just kind of walks you through with little short videos, understanding how to figure out which aspects of digestion are not working the right way and steps you want to take to correct those. And that'll kind of walk you through it and make everything a whole lot easier. And just know, your case might be a little bit more complicated. Mine was very complicated. It was very difficult for me to fix this, but I'm talking to you now. So just know that you can do it. If you get stuck and that free digestion course is not enough for you, know that since this was a big deal for me, I go over some very advanced steps that I used in our advanced digestion course. So know that there's more options for you to dig into more advanced information if you need that. I'll put the link to that in the description below as well. But your goal is really to acidify the stomach enough with these betaine HCl capsules that you can help the body start to generate its own hydrochloric acid, and then you can reduce the amount that you're supplementing with until you don't need it anymore. It's not meant to be an indefinite situation. You're just trying to help fix this malfunction that's going on and break this cycle of not having enough acid to break down our food and get the nutrients out, so not having enough nutrients to help the body get what it needs to make the HCl. If we can break that cycle, then we don't need these things that we're using to help fix the reflux in the first place. So the biggest takeaway for you is that the struggles that you're having make sense. It makes sense that this is difficult to fix if one of these things is going on. And now you know you just need to learn how to work with your body instead of against it. And the other thing that you need to do is you need to share this with a friend that's having a similar problem. I really get annoyed that this information is not available to everyone since I suffered for so long. So let's let other people know that there's answers for them as well. So I'll have all those links in the description to help you figure out what's going to help you the most. And right now, if you want to understand how to use those betaine HCl capsules the right way, you can jump over and check out our video on how much betaine HCl do I need. I can't wait to hear about your results.